Hey folks, you're very welcome. It's Róisín here with another sketching video. Well, September is upon us and that means the beginning of autumn in Ireland. And in Galway we have lots and lots of beautiful tree fruits, and I think I'm going to do some sketching. I've got some acorns, I've got some horse chestnuts, I have a few pine cones of various types, and I think that they could look really gorgeous done in ink and watercolour in my sketchbook. So I'm going to nip outside into the garden and I'm going to see what I can find, bring it back into the studio and do some sketching. Well, here is my little garden, and there's our lovely little dog. Okay, now where did I see these pine cones? Let's have a look. Well, here's an oak tree, and I definitely saw some acorns on this the other day. I am pretty sure they are close by. Where did I see them? See, this is what happens when you don't snip them at the time. I didn't do that because I sort of thought if I end up snipping a load of acorns and things and then find that I'm not getting through them fast enough, oh, here we go, then I'd feel guilty. Look at those, aren't those absolutely gorgeous? Wait now. Ooh, okay, let's have a little snip of those. Okay, lovely. Murdering some acorns, yes. All for the cause of art. Oh, here's some lovely pine cones. Will I murder one of these as well? Do you know what? I don't think I will do that yet. I will go back to the studio and I'll draw my acorns, possibly my oak apples if there are any. Are there any oak apples? I'll have a look for some oak balls as well because I think they'd look kind of cute next to the oak apples. All right, I'd better get started. Well, the season for sketching outdoors is still with us, but, well, I'm a bit of a chicken, so I am taking all my stuff indoors. As you can see, my fingers look a little bit cold there. So the first thing I like to do is fiddle with my composition, turn it this way and that until I am more or less happy with some kind of I suppose, composition. Now, I wanted to put the leaf and the acorns onto a white page because, well, you can see it better, but also it's nice to see the shadows clearly. I couldn't find my brown ink pen. Well, actually, that's not quite true. I lost it. I lost it during a workshop a few weeks ago. And I did have some new ones nearby, but I was a bit lazy. So I grabbed a dip pen, which is a lovely thing to draw with. I chose the one with the very skinny nib, and I knew almost immediately it wasn't going to work for me because it only gives one thin line. And even though I was pressing down on the nib, as you can see there, to get the slightly wider line with the flexible nib, it wasn't really coming out very, very flexible for me, and it wasn't giving the nice variety of line width that I like. So I decided to go and get my new Sailor 55 degree Fude pen and the converter to go with it. And I filled the pen with some document brown ink from Diatramentis, and I immediately felt much more on home territory, if you like. What I love about a Fude pen is that depending on the position that you hold the nib at, you can get lots of different angles of line width. So people say about a Fude pen that it's like 3 pens in one. I know the Fude pen is not for everybody, but I do think that even if you find it a bit difficult at first, you should stick with it for a little while, because in the long run it'll be a very expressive kind of an instrument that you'll possibly end up really loving. Now, you might not. You might run screaming for your microns where you're safe from a wayward line. It does take some getting used to, but I think it's worth it. I think it's worth the effort. So I have all my lines drawn, and now I'm doing a little bit of paint in. Okay, the first colour I'm starting with is a mixture of sap green and Aquarius yellow. Any bright clear green will do fine, and a little bit of bright clear yellow. I suppose I could give all the names, sap green and Aquarius yellow, as I said, but really there's so many colours that will get the job done. Then for the little acorn cups, I've used the same sort of mix, but I've added some Aquarius green into it, which is a beautiful granulating green from Roman Schmal. And for the leaves, I went for Green Apatite Genuine from Daniel Smith, and I actually mixed Perylene Green, also from Daniel Smith, in with that green because I wanted it to be really dark. And then I had a colour run, which is very annoying, and I had to fix it. But that's because I was impatient. You can't go too close if you want to be precise and keep everything as it should be. So I've skipped ahead a little bit because in real time, to be honest, everything took a long time. The interior of my studio is not very warm today, so things are taking an eternity to dry. So I kept kind of nipping back to the house and, I don't know, having cups of coffee and things like that, which wouldn't make for a very good video now, would it? You know, it's funny, I was looking at the finished sketch here and I was thinking how realistic the oak leaves looked. And it's because I noticed that they were a little bit darker green just to one side of those veins. So you can see I've put that in there on the right hand side of the leaf. So it's small little things like that that are really quite noticeable in the end. I suppose it's the same with the acorn here. And by the way, it's worth mentioning that I didn't think much of my sketch at this point. And as usual, I just, powered through because in my experience, things do end up looking fine if you just, keep going and keeping at it. But at this point, I figured I would do some darker areas at the edges of the acorns themselves. And it did seem to make a very big difference. It does take a bit of patience though, because you do have to wait for each layer to dry before you can safely add the next one. I did keep in the back of my mind when I was doing this sketch that adding the shadows would make a huge difference. And sure enough, putting the shadows down, it really did suddenly throw everything into 3 dimensions. Gosh, I had to be really careful not to go too close to any wet paint that was still on the leaves. But by that time, it was kind of drying up. For the shadows, I have used quite a dilute, I'm going to say a medium dilute, let's say dilute to very dilute Payne's Grey wash. And I have mixed a little bit of mineral violet in with it. Why did I do that? Well, I did think there was a bit of a purple hue to the shadows. So I figured I'd add a little bit of mineral violet. Now I'm going to negate all that by saying that sometimes that doesn't come out very well. Anyway, it ended up looking pretty okay, so I was pleased. You have to be quite quick, and even though I made the shapes of the shadows with a paintbrush, you're always at risk of those edges drying out and giving you a kind of a clumsy outline to your shadows, and then that doesn't look believable at all. It just really doesn't. So you have to work quite quickly and make sure you fill in the blue bits of the shadows as well as the outlines. So that's about it for the acorn leaf, the oak leaf with the acorns, and I've added a few little spots of white gel pen and also for the vein down the middle, and then when it was dry I ran over it with a very, very gentle and very light wash of yellow green. But my page is a little empty, so I'm back out to see what I can find outside. Well, here are some horse chestnuts. At least I think that's what they are. So I'm going to do a bit of horse chestnut murder. And take it back to the studio and add it to the page. So now my task is to find some way of arranging the horse chestnuts so that they look nice next to the painting I've already done. So just thrusting them this way and that way and poking them and prodding them, and off I go. So I'm starting with my Fude pen again, catching some nice lines. Gosh, I love these pens. They're just so fluid. I mean, they're not that expensive, but they're so well made. As long as you don't lose them and leave them on a bridge, as I did with my favourite pen not too long ago, they will last you for ages and ages. Now, I was happy out drawing away here, and then after a very short while, I looked up and realised that most of the drawing was happening off camera. So I got the drawing bit done, and then after that I jumped right into the painting. By the way, just to remind you, I'm using document ink in brown by Detrimentus. And I should point out as well, if you've got this far and you're enjoying what you see, do make sure to like and subscribe. And don't forget to comment as well, because, well, I love to hear what you have to say. But the thing about the subscribing is I think it's worth it, because I'm going to have tons and tons of really fun videos of people sketching and perspective and buildings and, I don't know, foliage, loads of cool stuff. It'll be different as autumn goes through and turns into winter. You know, there'll be some kind of cafe scenes and stuff like that. But I think you'll like what you'll find here. Now, as you can see, I'm painting away here, but unfortunately I didn't wait long enough for my brown ink to be dry, so it's smudging all over the place, which is a pity. Now, one thing you might have noticed is that I've got like white circles left behind on the horse chestnut skins, and that's because they're the sort of highlights, the shiny bits on the fruit itself. I'm not sure if you're supposed to call it fruit, but you know what I mean. So the skin isn't glossy. I wouldn't even call it satin, but it does have a very, very slight sheen. And you're going to capture that if you leave those little white unpainted patches. Now, in the time that I slit open one of the chestnuts and started painting it, the white flesh inside turned a really rich shade of reddy brown. So I'm using burnt sienna for that inside bit of the chestnut. Now I'm adding a few little spots of a very dark burnt umber on top of some of those little spots I put on with my dark brown ink. And timing is kind of everything here, because the colour of the skins, the paint on the skins of the fruit, is still a tiny bit wet. It's just wet enough to allow those little dark brown splodges to have slightly soft bleeding edges, which is kind of what they look like in reality. If the surface of the skins was bone dry, you wouldn't get that. It would just sit on top of it and it would be too hard. Sort of doing things in the wrong order here, because I decided looking at it that my green skins weren't quite bright green enough. So I added another wash of sap green and Aquarius yellow. And I had to be a bit gentle because I didn't want to poke the brown spots, because if I did, then they would start going into solution again, and I didn't want that. So I'm not actually that far from being done now. I'm just tweaking and poking and adding little bits of green, little bits of brown and so on. But then once again, I remembered that if I put on some shadows, the whole thing would spring into life. So if you're drawing a still life, especially something from nature, then I highly, highly recommend that you put on your shadows, because they always make things look really realistic and solid. And once again, I'm using a medium dilution of Payne's Grey. Just decided to darken up the edge of that horse chestnut skin there a little bit. Thought it looked a bit sort of dark green. Now you've got these little rusty brown patches on the surface of the skins, which are really lovely. And I was lucky because just the way the watercolour worked out, they reproduced that kind of, how would you describe it, slightly parchmenty texture when I put the paint on, which was very gratifying because I didn't do it deliberately, it just happened. But I am at this stage looking very carefully, and I'm looking for any shadows or darker bits that'll make the whole look more realistic. And you can still see it's still quite wet there, so there's not much you can do with it. After that, I decided to put on some cute leather stamps, and I love the look that they make. Well, Reuben's a bit bored now because he's been watching me paint all afternoon and he's not in a good mood, really. So I was holding him to look nice for the last shots of the video, but I don't think you could tell that he was in a bad mood. But I know he is. He keeps going back into his bed. So I've decided to be a bit kind of nice and leave him into his slumber. Anyway, I've had a really nice afternoon welcoming September and painting all these nice little acorns and horse chestnuts. And yeah, it's been really fun. So there's no getting away from September. September's arrived and the weather's going to be foul very soon in Galway. But for right now, it's a beautiful autumn afternoon, a little bit rainy, but it could be a lot worse. And I've enjoyed painting my little tree fruits. So get out there and go and find some acorns or some horse chestnuts. Maybe you'll find the ones with the prickles on them. I would have liked to have had those ones to paint, or the glossy dark brown ones. My tree hasn't made dark brown horse chestnuts, so there's always something to sketch, and this is a great time of year for us. So enjoy yourself. All that remains for me to say is thank you very much, as always, for watching. If you would like to know what brands I use, they're in all my other videos, so do have a look and see if you can find what you're looking for. I'm sure you can, and I'll see you the next time. Reuben, Rubes, Reuben, look up. Good boy.